Hey guys, Beast here. I'm back with another video. Today's video will be me talking about the unit counters, specifically Protoss unit counters. Now, this will be the first video in a series of 3 videos in total. So I'll be doing one for Protoss, one for Zerg, and one for Terran. Now, what is this video about? On the left side on your screen, you see the Protoss units. So it's Zealot, Stalker, Sentry, Adept, High Templar, Dark Templar, and an Archon. This graph will show you how to counter the units from Protoss race, including Gateway and Stargate units. So as you can see on top, this chart takes into account that all researchers have done, apart from weapon and armor upgrades. So what I mean by this is Stim, Blink, Zergling speed, Baneling speed, and so on. And list for the shortcuts of the letters, you guys will be able to see all the way under. So a lot of people ask me, how do I counter this? How do I counter that? So I made this graph together with Miko to show you how you can counter the unit specifically, or if you're meeting, for example, a Stalker Colossus, you can check this graph and you can see, for example, under Stalkers, there's Marauder, Siege Tank, Thors, and Raven PDD. And then you check the counters for Colossus, and you kind of make a mix between those units and you have your counter. So no matter what race you are, no matter what unit comp you're struggling against, or just one specific unit, you guys can always check this graph and see what counters those units and kind of build your own unit composition. Now, I'll address a couple of things and I'll explain to you guys how it works. It's fairly simple and fairly straightforward. On the left side, you have the Protoss units that you're trying to counter, and then the first row right here is the Terran units that counter it, then the Zerg units that counter that unit, and then the Protoss units. So for example, for Stalker, like I mentioned, Marauders countered it, Siege Tanks, Thors, Ravens with PDD. From Zerg, it's Zerglings, Hydras, Infestors with Fungal Growth, Lurkers, and Broodlords. And then what counter Stalkers from the Zealots, from Protoss, sorry, is Zealots, Immortals, Colossus, Void Rays, and Carriers. Now, I want to address one thing. This is my personal opinion in this graph. I made these counters for each unit, and some of you might not agree with them. Some of them, in order to count specific unit, would require like a lot of micro to make it work. So I made this graph for like obvious counters and stuff that you usually want to make in your games, no matter what league you are. Another thing I want to mention, I did not add units that can shoot ground, but the ground units cannot shoot air. So for example, for Zealots, I didn't add the Zealot counter to be a Banshee or a Liberator because the Zealots cannot shoot air. So it's obviously, you know, good thing to have against Zealots, but it's not really you want to mass just because you saw Zealots, the Hellbats or Hellions, Widowmines and Marines are better against them. Another thing is sometimes you will see Liberators, for example, against Disruptors. Even though Disruptors cannot shoot air, Liberators are used to zone out Disruptors in the games, and that's kind of the counter unit from Terran against Disruptors that you want to be making. But something like Zealots, I won't be including Liberators, because Liberators are obviously really good against any unit that does not shoot ground. So another thing to mention is the spellcasters, like Sentry that we have right here. I did not include that Marines counter it because it's a spellcaster, and obviously every unit in the game kills a Sentry. So I kind of added units that counter it, as in completely negate the force field or Guardian Shield. So for example, you have Ghosts with EMP, because once you EMP the sentries, it cannot cast Guardian Shield, it cannot cast Force Fields, and then it's basically a useless unit. Siege Tanks don't care about Force Fields, Thors can break Force Fields, Banshees are very good at picking sentries off early on, and then the Liberators, again, they can siege up, and then the sentries won't be able to get in position to do the Force Fields. I will link this graph under the description. I just kind of wanted to explain to you a few things, what I meant by them, what do they mean, and obviously the graph is not perfect, but again, in my opinion, this graph is something you can use no matter what league you are, and obviously no matter what race you are. And like I said, the Zerg unit counters and Terran unit counters will be coming in one of the next future videos. So if you follow the graph, you can see that, for example, for Adepts, again, there's no Liberator, it's Marauder. Widowmine and Thors are probably the most efficient units against Adepts. If you're Zerg, you want to be making 3 of these. Another thing I want to address is, for example, against stealthed units like Dark Templars. Pretty much anything kills Dark Templars if you just micro a little bit, but the units that counter it are the Widowmines, because if you have detection, they one-shot Dark Templars, which are very, very expensive. EMP, because some of you may not know this, but if you EMP a Dark Templar, it will reveal it for the next couple of seconds, so then you gain vision that way. And of course, the Raven, which is a detector, so it will reveal Dark Templars, making it easier for you to kill them. For Zerg, for example, I added Zerglings because with an Overseer, Zerglings are probably the most efficient units that are going to be able to catch Dark Templars, Banelings that can kill the Dark Templars with AoE, Infestor's Fungal Growth also reveals all stealthed units, and then you have the Overseer, which is kind of, you know, an obvious choice. I want to touch on the Archon as well. As you can see from the Zerg army specifically, the Archon, if you look at that list, it looks like the Archon is almost like broken in a way because not many units counter it. And the reason for that is Archon is just all around good unit. It's not a light unit and it's not an armored unit. So there's not a lot of units in StarCraft from either race that kind of counter it, because most of the units are armored, so you can make siege tanks against them or immortals, and that way you counter. But Archon is a psychic unit, or psionic unit, sorry. So it doesn't really take extra damage against anything, which is the reason why from Zerg units I only put Broodlords as a counter unit, because Broodlord is very long range unit that spawns Broodlings, so it's very hard for the Archon to push in. Meanwhile, the other units depend a lot on your engagements and how the game works in general, which is why a lot of Protoss players go for Archons when they play against Zerg. Same thing against Protoss. There's no unit that deals bonus damage against it, so no units counter it except the Tempest and Carriers. Now let's move on to the Robo units. Stuff like War Prism, you know, Marines obviously are going to kill it super fast, but the units that kind of counter it are War Prisms running into the Widowmine or Vikings, because Vikings can actually chase even if the War Prism is, you know, flying behind your mineral lines or just floating in dead space. Marines cannot reach there, so the Viking is probably the best thing for you to do in order to kill it as a Terran player. Now, if we move to the Stargate units, same thing. So as you can see, all Protoss air units get countered by Marines, which obviously doesn't mean that if Protoss builds air units, you should only make Marines and nothing else. You always want to add something to that. For example, it's the same thing with the Zerg. You can see all the air units get countered by Hydras, but I can tell you, you're not going to beat Mass Carrier with Mass Hydra, because there will be High Templars or you know, Archons or different kinds of units supporting it. So this graph is also something that you can make your own unit compositions with and kind of try to learn the game that way, because you will be able to understand the game a lot easier. Now at the end of this graph you have spellcasters, and I kind of just added what each of them mean, just so you guys you know what I'm talking about. So the letter A, when you see it like this, will mean all spells from that unit. From when you see a ghost with EMP, it means that the spell EMP counters that specific unit. If it's a High Templar, for example, fighting against Ghost, all the spells are good against it, both Cloak, EMP, and Snipe. If you're using Ravens against Stalker or Tempest, PDD is what you want to use. Battlecruiser Yamato is Y. For Infestors, Fungal Growth is F. N is Neural Parasite. And then Viper, you have Abduct and Parasitic Bomb that counter those units. For Oracles, you have Revelation. And then for High Templars, Storm and Feedback. Now another thing that I mentioned earlier you can use is you can check the unit that gives you the most trouble. For example, if you're playing against Adept Phoenix, which is really popular in the recent times, So what you want to do for PvT, you find where the adept is. So you can see that Marauders and Widowmines are pretty good against adept as well as Thors. And then you scroll down and you check Phoenix. So you can see that Thor counters both units. So if you're in the lower leagues, that's something I would suggest you to make. But you can see that Phoenix gets countered by EMPs and Marines. So your perfect unit composition would be a mix of Marines, Marauders, Widowmines, and then if you want, you can add EMP. Another example of this is, let's say the Protoss is massing Stalker and Colossus. You want to check what kind of Stalkers, which is Marauders, Siege Tanks, and PDD. If you scroll down, you find Colossus, which is right there at the bottom. The same two units counter Colossus, which are Siege Tanks and Thors. So if you would play Mech, that's the units you want to be making against Stalker Colossus. If you're playing Bio, on the other hand, you want to be having a lot of Marauders because Colossus do extra bonus damage against lights. Marines are always good, and they're kind of like a unit that will always supplement any other unit in the fights. And then the Colossus gets countered by the Viking. So if you're going for more bio-oriented comp, you want to make Marine Marauder Viking. And if you're doing some kind of early push, you can do Marine Siege Tank, because as you can see, Siege Tanks counter both Stalkers and Colossus, especially if the Protoss has some sentries, which again get countered by the Siege Tank. Once again, I will link you this graph in the description of this video. I kind of wanted to make a video about it and just kind of give you my thought process behind this. And I hope this helps you, kind of figure out StarCraft, whether you're a beginner or, you have some experience in StarCraft, or even if you're, as high as Diamond or Master League. I hope you learn something from this and kind of understand better how to make your unit compositions, whether you're playing Mech or Bio, or even if you're any other races, like if you're Protoss or Zerg, because there's scanners for that as well. One thing I want to mention is Carrier as well. Right here, you can see that Carrier in PvP only gets countered by Carrier, because Carrier for Protoss against Protoss is the ultimate unit, so nothing really counters it, and the best way to counter Carriers is build your own Carriers, which is something we've seen pro players do quite a lot, and the guy that doesn't have Carriers usually ends up winning. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned something. Once again, I will be releasing Terran and Zerg unit counters, same thing like this graph is. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that. If you did like the video, make sure you like and subscribe. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.